Hi guys, can you hear me? Okay, great. All right, my name is Paul Lee. I'm the co-CEO of Korea's first institutional Bitcoin treasury company in Korea called Bitplanet. We're pretty new. We fully closed our deal literally 7 days ago, so last Wednesday, and we announced our deal about 3 months ago. So I'm here to talk about Korea. Korea, I think, is probably one of the most exciting countries to launch a Bitcoin treasury business right now. There is a lot of investor demand. In the short time we have launched, our stock is the highest performing stock across all exchanges in Korea year to date. So there's obviously a lot of demand, which comes with opportunity. What are the long-term opportunities that are specific to Korea? I can talk about a lot of things. I think there are several. There are tax arbitrage or favorable tax structure for Bitcoin treasury companies. That's very similar to Bitplanet, which has not enacted yet, but it will be there in about 15 months. I can talk about the maturity and size of the capital market in Korea. And Korea being one of the rule of law country in Korea, which in Asia, which is pretty rare actually in Asia. And Korean capital market and institutional investors are definitely ready to take in a lot of credit instruments that Michael Saylor kind of outlined this morning. I can talk about the new president, the new administration, new administration's favorable stance towards crypto, which is sort of a 180-degree change since the last president and last administration. But one thing I am most excited about is actually the macro reality of Korea and the lack of, or the fact that the Bitcoin narrative, the healthy Bitcoin story, has not yet taken root in Korea. So let's talk about macro in Korea. So first is population. You probably heard Korean birth rate is the lowest in the world, like by a big margin. It's actually in the 0.6s. In about 60 years, Korean population is going to cut in half of what it is today. The growth rate of GDP in Korea has dipped below 2%, I think, for the first time in many decades. And what that means is the national pension fund, the size of national pension fund, projection of national pension fund size is like this, which means in about 10 to 15 years, national pension fund is going to decrease in size. In about 30 to 40 years, it's going to be zero. And it's a big fund. I think Korea's pension fund is probably the third largest pension fund in the world, and a lot of people depend on it. If you're a 40-year-old, working person like me in Korea, if you want to retire in 25 years, that means there will be a really little social safety net available for you. And let's talk about real estate, right? Seoul real estate is insane, is comparable to that of Manhattan. The difference between the US and Korea is that a lot of economic infrastructure, business infrastructure is focused in Seoul. So if you're priced out of Seoul, you're basically cut out from a lot of economic opportunities. If you're a 30-year-old Korean person making 60, 70K in a year in Korea, which is upper middle class income in Korea, you probably need to, win a lottery or, inherit some money from your parents or, trade meme coin to make 100x, to get married, have kids and buy an apartment, etc. So, on the other hand, the retirement fund, 401k, they're all focused on very safe 4 to 5% yielding, principal guaranteed, like CD-like products. So that's sort of an illustration of how polarized Korea is in terms of macroeconomic structure. There's a lot of disconnect across different investor group, different generations. working class and non-working class. And what I truly believe is that Bitcoin is actually one of the best powerful tools or best assets to actually bridge that gap. And by catering to people across all investor groups, by being a high growth asset that is maturing to be one of the most important macro assets in the world. Also by being a safe and durable asset that is one of the most liquid assets in the world. And that sort of aligning Bitcoin with the sort of a macro reality of Korea, I think that's really the biggest unlock and the biggest opportunity there is in Korea, and that's what I'm most excited about. And I said a lot of bad things about Korea, but what Koreans work hard. I love Korea, and when they find the collective vision in Korea, they go at it. They form community very quickly, and I envision that collective vision to be vision of Bitcoin, Michael Saylor's vision, Satoshi's vision. And that is why I'm most excited about what I do. And that I think is probably the biggest opportunity Korea has. So that's it from me.
Good morning, everyone. Just had to check the time then, because obviously I've just come over from the UK, so different time zone. So my name is Andrew, and I'm the founder and the CEO of the Smarter Web Company. And I just wanted to tell you a very brief bit about our story. And then I picked out 3 things that I think are worth talking about briefly. So I set up my business in 1999. I started my career in 1999. I worked at a small company that became one of the biggest companies in the UK, one of the largest retail brokers in the UK. And then I left there after 10 years because I got bored. So I set up my own small technology company 15 years ago, the Smarter Web Company. And then I found Bitcoin almost 10 years ago. For me, it wasn't until Michael Saylor, who is obviously incredible, put public companies and Bitcoin together, that I really thought that, this is the answer to everything as far as I'm concerned. And then in the UK, we didn't have a Bitcoin Treasury company. I started looking about 3 years ago for one, because I wanted to make an investment in one, and there wasn't one. So eventually we got to last year, and I decided that I'd list my business, which is, what I did and why I'm speaking to you today. We listed the business in April 2025, so that's 5 months ago. I'm credited with pioneering the strategy in the UK, which I'm very grateful for. I'm more proud of the fact that everyone told me that I couldn't do it. They said it wouldn't work. I pointed out strategy. I pointed out Bitplanet. They still told me that it wouldn't work. But we have become the best performing IPO in the UK ever. Obviously there's volatility in the market at the moment, but I'm really proud of that fact, and I believe that the best is yet to come. So our focus is delivering Bitcoin yield. We do have a small operating business, which is an important aspect of what we do. It's something that I'm very proud about because I'm a programmer myself. But everyone asks me what makes us different. And I think the second thing that I'm going to talk about is the way that we communicate. So right from the start, we've tried to do everything openly and transparently as much as possible as you can do with a public company. And I think that has worked so far. It's given us the 3rd largest investor community on X, only behind Strategy and Bitplanet. Almost 4,500 individuals in that community, and I'm pretty proud of that. So I wanted to briefly talk about these 3 things. So firstly, capital. So I loved hearing Saylor talk earlier and his wise words. And he says everything much better than I will. But the thing that I would like to say about capital is that bearing in mind everyone said that I couldn't do this, in 5 months we've raised over £200 million of pretty much pure equity. We've got a tiny amount of convertible Bitcoin denominated debt, but we've managed to raise 200 million, and we could have raised an awful lot more. So the advice that I'd give to anyone thinking about doing this strategy is there is no rush here. You've got to move fast, and they all joke that we're the fastest horse, but get the right capital. The wrong capital will cost you dearly, and it may even be worse than that. It might end the game. So yeah, get the right capital. My favorite subject is the second thing, communication. So obviously, I view my job as a Bitcoin Treasury CEO as, the best job in the world, and I'm incredibly grateful to everyone that allows me to do this. But communication isn't a secondary thing to the job. It is the job. It's not something that you should view as a chore or anything like that. I write an update to our shareholders. I actually write it on a Friday, but I put it out on a Saturday morning. Jesse, who works alongside me, we counted in July. We did 70 YouTube appearances in one calendar month, together. Communication is the best bit about the job, but it's also what your investors want. Maybe when we get much, much bigger, there'll be more one-on-one communication with much, much larger institutions, but we'll still always communicate with the retail shareholders, and they are the people that have got us to, where we are today. So yeah, I would do everything honestly and with transparency there. And then finally, the third point, which you probably don't want to hear too much about, is the regulation point. So we're lucky in the UK that it's a very relatively open environment. Some of my friends that run these companies in other parts of the world, it's harder for them. But anyone involved in the space, I view our jobs as helping the regulators understand things better, just like we try and make everyone understand Bitcoin better. It's our jobs to convince the doubters on the regulation side that they're wrong. And then finally, the thing that I'd like to stress, and I touched on it earlier, is that, being a Bitcoin Treasury company isn't a shortcut to performance. Take your time, obviously focus on Bitcoin yield, but take your time and get it right. If we all do this together and we do it in the right way, I believe there will be thousands and thousands and thousands of these companies. I believe almost every company, private and public, will have some degree of Bitcoin on the balance sheet. But that's what I'd say. I'd say, go as fast as you can, but, please get it right. And if anyone ever needs any help, then, just ping me an email or something, and, I'll do my best to help if that's asked of me.
First of all, I'm upset with Ed and Tim for not giving us the memo that all speakers had to wear a suit with an orange tie. We didn't do that, but at least all three of us didn't do that. It's an honor to be on this particular panel. I've been following what Andrew's been doing with Smarter Web for a while. As Eleanor mentioned, I'm the CSO of Arcadia Bitcoin. We're a new treasury company in Mexico. Ed Julien recently joined our team. All of you know who Ed is. I'll give you a bit of a background on Mexico and a bit on what we've been doing. Similar to some of Paul's background context, obviously most of you in here are Americans, some Europeans, but and beyond. But obviously we all have some familiarity with Mexico, usually on the beaches. Mexico's 15th largest GDP country in the world. 130 million people in Mexico. Mexico is the gateway not just to the US, but to Spanish-speaking Latin America. 450 million people live in Latin America and speak Spanish, so outside of Brazil. There is $350 billion tied up in pension funds in Mexico that have a lot of restrictions around investing in foreign capital markets, but limited opportunity in domestic markets. They're currently returning around 6% per year. M2 growth is 10% a year in Mexico. The $700 billion in domestically owned treasury instruments, 100 billion more in money markets. So that's, if you're doing the math, over $1 trillion of trapped capital, primarily institutions. There's a grassroots Bitcoin community in Mexico that's really interesting, emerging in a lot of the different communities. I live in Monterrey, which is the second largest city in Mexico outside of the Ciudad de Mexico. Ed and I are both bilingual in Spanish, if you didn't know that. So we're the two gringos on the team, but we speak Spanish and we eat Mexican food all the time. Our company, Arcadia, was previously known as Capital X, has an 8-year track record, but unlike most every other treasury company in the market, we're actually a Bitcoin company. The other day I heard Jack Mullers asked about 21, and they said, tell us about the treasury company. He said, we're not a treasury company, we're a Bitcoin company with a proactive LBE Bitcoin treasury strategy. And that's how we define ourselves. So I joined only months ago. The company was formed by two cypherpunks back in 2017, have been servicing Bitcoin brokerage, Bitcoin-backed lending. We have a debit card. We have a DCA coming very soon now. We have some support for institutions, OTC and otherwise. Our underlying business model generates Bitcoin organically. We are a native Bitcoin company pursuing an aggressive Bitcoin treasury strategy. We are private, we're early, so been following Andrew and some of the other earlier treasury companies that are gaining traction, to learn from all of them. So it's amazing, again, to be on the stage with them. We have our own custody in-house. Within 30 days, we'll be publishing our proof of reserves. We offer custody for our institutional customers and our retail customers pretty soon. Our debit card will soon have a BTC cashback, so kind of like Fold. We have a growing lending business that's kind of like Ledin. So we are aimed to be the place to go for institutions and retail investors in the Bitcoin community, whether you want to be on the Bitcoin self-custody or you want to be in the investment, or both. And we see a lot of synergy with both. We aim to tokenize our securities and allow pathways for our investors to migrate their securities into our app to then leverage for Bitcoin-backed lending, et cetera. So you can envision all kinds of pathways for synergy amongst them. And with that, we're opening to questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With a focus on the challenges in new markets, any questions, comments, anyone I can throw the mic to here? Anybody? Anybody? Got one back there.
Hey guys, so first and foremost, thanks so much for that intro. You guys mentioned that, part of this challenge is kind of, educating these new populations that maybe haven't had access. And not just that, but allowing equity investors in these markets access to Bitcoin through the Bitcoin Treasury company or through the Bitcoin company, as opposed to just holding spot Bitcoin. Can you guys just speak to that specifically?
I'll start. One thing that's fascinating, so we're a Bitcoin company, and so we struggle with this too when we think about the treasury side, and like, are we discouraging people, retail investors, from holding spot Bitcoin and self-custody, which is something our underlying business has been doing for 8 years, supporting that. There's a couple things. First of all, in Mexico, I didn't mention, is really interesting. There's a tax arbitrage for retail. So retail investors can pay up to 35% capital gain on the sale of spot Bitcoin, but they're capped at 10% on the sale of equities and public instruments. So what we see is that it's very easy for all of us sort of core Bitcoiners to like put everyone in a pigeonhole and say everyone needs to buy all of their Bitcoin and hold in self-custody. But what is that? 5% of the current Bitcoin held in the world is held that way. We have to meet people where they are to help them on their Bitcoin journey. And our vision is, all right, you can, if you're not totally orange pilled but you want to get exposure to Bitcoin, well, we can enable that through our public instruments. As you get orange pilled, we have a vehicle to tokenize those instruments, and you can bring those into our app and start learning to actually engage with Bitcoin in a more personal way. And my core takeaway from this is we have to meet people where they are, whether they're institutions, whether they're small business, or whether retail. And if we only have one view of the only way to own and engage with Bitcoin is holding in self-custody, we're not going to orange pill the world the way we want to. The way to do it is give them a range of optionality, let them enter where they're ready and comfortable, and over time they will orange pill and also engage in spot Bitcoin and maybe still hold our equities.
I can add to that as well that, in the UK, we've got a similar situation, slightly different, but broadly the same. I hold almost 100% of everything that I've got in the world in Bitcoin or Bitcoin Treasury companies. And for me, as controversial as it is, and hopefully none of you will sort of come and hit me afterwards, Bitcoin Treasury companies, when well run, offer something that's better than Bitcoin. If we all agree that Bitcoin is the best asset in the world, then, how do you get better than that? Well, the answer is very simple. It's compound Bitcoin. And that's what we offer, through Bitcoin Yield. And if you think about it in terms of the securitization of Bitcoin, which is ultimately what we're all doing here, in different degrees, creating different products for different needs. For my personal need, what do I need? Well, I want the performance of Bitcoin, but I'd like more. So a Bitcoin treasury company is an alternative to people that see the value of Bitcoin, but want something maybe more volatile, for example. But Bitcoin in itself doesn't offer compound returns,
Yeah.
I have a question for Andrew. As a new IPO in UK market.
Can you speak up a little?
As a new IPO in UK market, looking at growth opportunities, how easy or difficult it can be for UK company to acquire a new operating profitable business and or acquire a new struggling treasury company in UK?
Yeah, okay. So there's a couple of questions in that, really. So if the question is, how easy is it to an IPO a business in the UK? It's pretty easy, actually. You can see that there's 25 that sort of pivoted or IPO'd after us. It's not that hard if you know what you're doing, and there's lots of people that can help with that. And then what you need to do is you need to get the structure right. So one of the things that I was very keen on was making sure that the structure was compliance within the regulations. Clearly that's important. So I IPO'd my business, which is a small business with a Bitcoin treasury policy. And it's as simple as that, really. Then once you're listed, the final part of the question in terms of, acquiring other companies, we can acquire whatever we want. So I'm building a balance sheet on the best asset in the world for the future. And then probably not in the next week, but in the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, etc., we will roll out that policy that's been clearly stated since the outset, the acquisition strategy, using the strength of our balance sheet to acquire the right opportunities. What's the right opportunity? Very simple. Basically anything that will deliver value for our shareholders. So I don't see right now, today, us acquiring another Bitcoin treasury company today, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 3 months, 6 months, not necessarily in the UK, then that might be good, and that would be a good thing for those other companies. It would aggregate companies together, and continue our mission. So yeah, hope that answers the question.
If I may answer that gentleman's question as it applies to Korea, because I think it's important. I 100% echo what Andrew and Boyd said. I think the important role of a treasury company in each capital market is to basically amplify access to Bitcoin and Bitcoin-backed products. In Korea, there are only 5 crypto exchanges. One of them is Upbit that has a 70% market share. And what Korean government did is basically pair each one of the 5 with a bank in Korea. So in order to open an account with these crypto exchanges, you have to open an account with these banks first. So if you haven't used that bank before, it doesn't matter. You have to go to the bank and open that account. Some of them are just pure internet banks that don't have any offline branches. You have to go online and open an account, which is very hard for example, my 7-year-old dad, right? He trades stock all the time. That's basically his hobby. And he's interested in crypto. He's interested in Bitcoin, Ethereum. I've been trying to orange pill him for a while. I know he is never going to actually go to a bank by himself, a bank that he never used to open an account to buy Bitcoin. But it is going to be very easy for him to basically buy equity, Bitcoin Treasury equities, my company Bitplanet, or Microstrategy in the US. So I think in that sense, we're definitely opening up the market by by a big margin to retail investors, institutional investors, to this new product called Bitcoin, and also Bitcoin-backed securities and credit products.
Go to you, Chim.
Hola, César de Football Tech. Boyd, pregunta en español. ¿Cómo ves el papel de Bitcoin?
Ándale. Nadie habla español aquí, güey.
Como herramienta.
No, inglés.
Bueno, Boyd, ¿cómo ves? How do you see Bitcoin as a tool for financial inclusion throughout Latin America?
Yeah, thank you, Cesar, for the question. I could answer that in Spanish, but Ed would get mad at me. So there's over 50%, just over 50% of the Mexican population is unbanked, which is hard to believe. It's a pretty developed country. You might have a view of Mexico outside of beaches. It's a lot of poverty, but I live in what is actually the highest GDP per capita municipality in all of Latin America, in Monterrey, Mexico. It's beautiful. Yet we have a lot of inequality like we see around the world, and we certainly have it around Mexico and around Latin America, Argentina, Venezuela. My wife is Venezuelan. Bolivia, a lot of you probably heard what happened very recently with Bolivia around US dollars. It looked a lot like what US did with gold decades ago. So this is the interesting thing about Bitcoin in Latin America and Mexico, is that there is significant demand at a grassroots level. You see a lot of these Bitcoin circular economies in Mexico and Argentina, in El Salvador, in many communities where they're starting to use Bitcoin with or without government involvement whatsoever. So in Mexico, what we have is significant recognition that money is broken and a desire to have something better in communities where people are unbanked or underbanked. That includes small business. They're onboarding to Bitcoin. We actually have a service for them too, for SMEs that actually want to receive payment in Bitcoin. So there's growing pent-up demand at the lower levels. What we see is a real gap at the institutional level. The central bank doesn't get it yet. The large existing publicly traded companies don't get it at all. I spoke to a guy who used to be governor of the board of Mexico. He said he's on 5 major boards and he hasn't heard Bitcoin referenced once on any meeting with a bank board, with a major construction company board, and many others. So it's not on their radar yet. You know, problem and opportunity. We see it as a great opportunity. Is we're the first in the market, Bitcoin native and Bitcoin Treasury in Mexico. Opportunities are big.
Thank you, gentlemen. We're going to.
I think that's.
Yeah, thank you very much. We're going to go on to the next session now.
Bitcoin custody is evolving, and OnRamp leads this change with multi-institution custody, eliminating single points of failure. Instead of one institution or complex private keys, OnRamp secures your Bitcoin in a segregated, cold storage, multi-sig vault backed by 3 independent, institutional-grade custodians. No single custodian can move funds by themselves, providing an unprecedented level of security that traditional custody solutions simply can't match. Protected by a $100 million Lloyd's of London insurance policy, all transactions are fully auditable on-chain, never rehypothecated, and executed only at your explicit direction. This means complete transparency and control over your assets at all times. Beyond custody, OnRamp delivers comprehensive Bitcoin financial services, including lending, trading, inheritance planning, IRAs, and more. OnRamp functions as your private banking partner, coordinating key holder activity, removing technical burdens, and providing a personalized, trust-minimized experience tailored to your specific wealth preservation goals. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or an experienced holder, OnRamp's approach helps secure generational wealth with unmatched security and peace of mind. Visit onrampbitcoin.com today to learn more, sign up, or book a free consultation with their team of Bitcoin custody experts. Hey guys, today's episode is brought to you by StampSeed. If you're in cold storage, you know how important it is to protect your seed phrase. That's why I recommend you head over to stampseed.com and check it out for yourself. This seed phrase storage device is one solid piece of titanium. There are no loose pieces, and you can hammer your seed phrase in letter by letter. When you go to stampseed.com, use promo code TIM15 for a 15% discount across the website. That's TIM15. Join us at the Wynn in Las Vegas, February 23rd through the 26th, 2026, for Bitcoin for Corporations. Use code KOTZ when you grab your tickets at strategy.com, and we'll see you there. This episode is brought to you by Arch Lending, the premier provider of crypto-backed loans designed for both individual and institutional investors. At Arch, your digital assets work for you without selling them. Arch offers flexible loan options tailored to your needs. Backed by industry leaders like Morgan Creek Digital, Castle Island Ventures, and Galaxy Ventures, Arch Lending is setting a new standard in crypto-backed lending. Are you ready to unlock the potential of your crypto assets? Visit archlending.com to learn more and configure your loan today. Are you looking for comprehensive analytics on corporate Bitcoin adoption? Strategy Tracker delivers real-time insights into how companies are executing their Bitcoin strategies completely free. Monitor NAV premiums, cost basis performance, and track how corporate Bitcoin treasuries perform against the market. Upgrade to premium for just $3.99 a month and unlock exclusive benefits like detailed market rankings, real-time trading volume analysis, and advanced performance metrics for corporations embracing Bitcoin. Apply code KOTZ at checkout for 100% off your first month of premium. Strategy Tracker is your essential tool for measuring the effectiveness of corporate Bitcoin strategies. Visit strategytracker.com and gain the analytical edge in understanding the Bitcoin treasury phenomenon.